Hello there. As I've shared before, there is overwhelming evidence of the enslavement of mankind. Admittedly, those conditions vary from inhumane to seemingly affluent, but they are all slavery nonetheless. The early people so focused on that knowledge are what we can term ancient psychologists. They are the modern-day controllers because they have successfully exploited the human species' weaknesses. In the process, they've kept important information hidden, which has created a power differential with the public at large. We're in a war. Join me for this first part of a look at a likely unnoticed side of symbolism. Thanks for being here. Continuing with Lysander Spooner's Vices Are Not Crimes, a Vindication of Moral Liberty, here is the first of 3 readings. But it will be said that some men are made, by their vices, dangerous to other persons. That a drunkard, for example, is sometimes quarrelsome and dangerous toward his family or others. And it will be asked, has the law nothing to do in such a case? The answer is that if, either from drunkenness or any other cause, a man be really dangerous, either to his family or to other persons, not only himself may be rightfully restrained, so far as the safety of other persons requires, but all other person who know or have reasonable grounds to believe him dangerous may also be restrained from selling or giving to him anything that they have reason to suppose will make him dangerous. Welcome to episode 27 of the Exit Your Matrix show. We are continuing with our look at techniques of mind control, which are the methodologies that individuals and particularly institutions, meaning artificial constructs, utilize to further their agendas. A function of regaining and then holding on to our individual sovereignty and collective freedom is the understanding of these techniques. When I chose discovery of truth through discovery of self as the theme for this channel and Exit Your Matrix, this is what I meant: a deep and lifelong exploration of who we are as human beings, and not just understanding ourselves individually, but our species, what strengths and capabilities we have, but also what weaknesses and deficiencies we must at least recognize and optimally take action to improve. To give us some perspective on the power of symbolism as a method of communication, Confucius said, or wrote, I'm not sure, that signs and symbols rule the world, not words or law. So symbolism is a language, and like any language, anyone who is not literate in it is at a major disadvantage. Their inability to understand what is presented in this form of symbols makes them vulnerable to manipulation. Let's use a movie I've discussed before as the perfect conceptual illustration. And if you're not familiar with it, that is They Live. And you have the glasses there representing literacy of the language, of the symbology that Rowdy Roddy Piper's character was encountering all around him. Without that understanding of the language through the metaphor of the glasses, all he would be able to see is the relentless media, marketing, and messaging. And make no mistake, it is everywhere, and its purpose is to usurp consciousness, to interrupt and influence the proper functioning of a person's thoughts, emotions, and actions. And what kind of language are symbols? It's occulted language, which, as I've stressed before, simply means that it is hidden. Nothing else, not evil, not satanic, not dark or scary, or even negative, and certainly not a cult. The word occult is derived from the Latin verb occultare, with roots in the word ocular or eye, so its meaning is to hide from sight or to conceal. When we have this knowledge, it naturally follows that whatever that occulted information is, it can be positive or negative, light or dark. Now, before we go any further, I have to stress my perspective that the meaning of the symbols themselves is, of course, very important. but awareness that the deployment of symbols as an influencing strategy exists and that they are powerful tools. That's by far more important. And there are 3 types of symbolism: solar symbolism, life force symbolism, and astrotheology symbolism. First up is solar symbolism, which targets needs. By far the most utilized application of solar symbolism is in the marketing of products. As you'll see, we're talking about some of the biggest corporations on the planet, and given that for most consumers the logo is the primary symbol they associate with those brands and products, you have to be aware that they spend a great deal of care in selecting them. We're talking major time, effort, and money are put into the logos and the symbolism they include. And the most effective method of targeting an audience that is unenlightened, because that being understands, whether at a conscious or unconscious level, that they lack knowledge, or another way of saying this is that they are ignorant. So what symbol is most effective on the unenlightened? Light, which takes shape in solar symbolism. And while we're here, it's important again to differentiate ignorance from nescience. So the classic example of nescience is the small child, unaware of a thing called gravity, doesn't understand the implications of stepping off of a cliff. Nescience is just the unawareness or the inability to comprehend the information. Then we look at ignorance, on the other hand, and that is actively avoiding the information, or what's even more frightening is rejecting that information. So it's rejecting truth and knowledge. Hey folks, a brief interruption to encourage you to order Mark Passio's amazing repository of knowledge, or ARC Drive. This is 2 terabytes of books, audio, and video on a mind-blowing variety of topics from his personal archive. If you're not already on a journey of awakening, absolutely start here. If you're already on the path, I can assure you you'd be exposing yourself to information you won't see anywhere else. So get that ordered today. And before I get into these, a guy named Richard Casaro has a website with a great 2-part article called Occult Symbols and Corporate Logos, Rediscovering Their Ancient Magical Meaning, that you should definitely check out, and it will provide a lot more detail and offer even more interpretations than I'm even familiar with. So first up we have BP with this sunflower, which looks strikingly solar and I'll call it starbursty. But doesn't that look like a solar symbol to you? I believe it is. And here we have Sunoco. So it's right there in the name, sun. And we have that prominent diamond, which, to quote Richard Casaro that I mentioned earlier, the diamond symbol occurs in every era, culture, religion, esoteric sect, and spiritual tradition. Okay, so here we have Dole Foods and ShopRite. Now we have the life force of the sun associated with food, which owes its existence to the sun. And look how the grocery cart is right in front of it. Imagery of the sun creating food, which of course it does, but you can see it there being presented to you in a different form than words. And here we have SunTrust. This is a financial institution, again, right in the name. And then we have a symbol plus words in this case, so money as an energy force. And is it not true, sadly, unfortunately, that money is required to support life in the current reality we're experiencing? So you can see how they would connect the two. And here we have Target. So we have the sun and the target, or the bullseye shape. And so this represents coming to enlightenment and reaching one's true center. So naturally, you need to hit your local Target soon. And what do you think about this one? What about associating one of the most iconic symbols of luxury and affluence with ancient Egypt through the use of the Egyptian religion's sun disk deity, Ra? And look what I found. According to Bentley, the wings of the logo are, quote, a symbol of the celestial. Wow. Like I said, nothing to see here, so let's all get back to our fondle slabs and shopping and social media and sports and all of the things that make us so happy. So let's hear that second section of Vices Are Not Crimes. But because one man becomes quarrelsome and dangerous after drinking spirituous liquors, and because it is a crime to give or sell liquor to such a man, it does not follow at all that it is a crime to sell liquors to the hundreds and thousands of other persons who are not made quarrelsome or dangerous by drinking them. Before a man can be convicted of crime in selling liquor to a dangerous man, it must be shown that the particular man to whom the liquor was sold was dangerous, and also that the seller knew or had reasonable grounds to suppose that the man would be made dangerous by drinking it. So solar symbology is highly related to movement, and movement is associated with life. And what is most symbolic of life? The sun. In the first of my 2 recent episodes on religion as a technique of mind control, we heard Jordan Maxwell share the fairly widely held belief among true scholars that one of the most foundational elements of the biblical story, the sun, is actually referring to the sun, which to anyone with sufficient mental agility and the courage to set their beliefs and indoctrination aside would have to acknowledge at least begs some questions. Now, let's see. The sun does set on death and rise, resurrection. It just does it every day, right? And another word for heaven is sky, and that's where the sun is, right? Damn. Hi there. As I've stressed before, I present this information from the perspective of an aggregator, or I guess maybe the closest thing I think of is as a reporter. So researching and communicating things that I have found to be true wisdom. But I have to admit, it's challenging to be messaging the most inconvenient of truths and content people just don't want to hear. Like humanity having surrendered its sovereignty to imbeciles and tyrants, and it being led around by the nose through the most juvenile forms of manipulation and propaganda. I've made the commitment to do this because our circumstances are dire, in my opinion, but primarily I do it because I believe those who are aware of this information have a moral obligation to share it. So please help me. More subscribers and likes and shares gets us in front of more people. Simple as that. And know that as challenging as things are, the greatest fact in all of this is that because we allowed it to happen, we can also correct it. So go ahead, subscribe. I'll wait. Take your time. And here's that final portion from Lysander Spooner. The presumption of law is, in all cases, that the sale is innocent, and the burden of proving it criminal, in any particular case, rests upon the government. And that particular case must be proved criminal, independently of all others. Subject to these principles, there is no difficulty convicting and punishing men for the sale or gift of any article to a man who is made dangerous to others by the use of it. So back to these examples of corporate symbols or logos, of course, these companies want you to associate their product and brand with energy, warmth, locomotion, and ultimately the life force energy that drives our existence on this planet, which is the sun. Now let's go a little bit deeper, because the real message being communicated is that, just like the sun, life would not be possible without it. Said another way, our product is life force and you can't do without it, so buy up. Ooh, let's see if there might be life force imagery in any of these. Now when we take a look at these first few here, you'll just have to straighten me out, but the last time I came into contact with oil, it was this kind of golden brown color, kind of like honey. So what's up with the red? Perchance, could the symbolism here be that oil is lifeblood? Or at least that's what they're trying to have us understand? And of course we have another financial institution with them showing you that money is related to the life force of blood in this red. And notice there how if you just take out that white section that's missing and you color that in red, look what you have. Now the next symbol is a really intriguing one, and from the outset I want to challenge you to be as open-minded as you possibly can. So here it is. The fasces. As you can see here, it's a bundle of wooden rods with the blade coming either out of the side or the top and bound together with what is described as a leather thong. That strikes me as potentially uncomfortable. Oh well, that's innocent enough and explains everything, right? Well, I got more curious when I discovered that two fasces form the armrests of the Lincoln Memorial. And they're on the state seal of Colorado, and on the seal of the New York City borough of Brooklyn, and on the emblem of the Knights of Columbus, and, drumroll please, prominently displayed right there on either side of the podium in our very own U.S. House of Representatives. Huh. Interesting that you never see that angle when the duly selected president, His Excellency, is giving his State of the Disunion address. The Lincoln Memorial one was new to me, so I did a search, and the very first entry that popped up was from none other than the National Park Service, and listen to this. In ancient times, fasces were a Roman symbol of power and authority, a bundle of wooden rods and an axe bound together by leather thongs. Fasces represented that a man held imperium, or executive authority. Exercising imperium, a Roman leader could expect his orders to be obeyed, could dole out punishment, and could even execute those who disobeyed. Now there's an idea I can get behind. The fasces he carried symbolized this power in two ways. The rods suggest punishment by beating. Nice. The axe suggests beheading. Sweet. On its surface, the fasces imply power, strength, authority, and justice. The fasces as a symbol of union. The structure itself echoes and amplifies the idea of a strong union. It goes on. The Lincoln Memorial is physically held up by the columns, standing strong because all the columns are working together. Without each column, the building would fall, just as a nation would fall without all its states. And of course, I've saved the best for last. This section, A Legacy of Fasces, appears naturally at the very end of the article, and it has the best stuff. So fasces is the root word for fascism, a political ideology marked by nationalism, totalitarianism, and imperialism that exerted a dramatic force over global politics, particularly in the 30s and 40s, most infamously in Germany's Nazi Party, which is modeled after the Italian fascist movement. It goes along. Unlike the American interpretation of the fasces as a symbol of strength through unity, the Italian fascists identified with the power and brutality also inherent in the fasces meaning. Sons of bitches. Coincidentally, Mussolini's ascent came in 1922, just 5 months after the Lincoln Memorial was dedicated, with the fasces as its overarching design element. Over time, tastes, styles, words, and symbols' meanings change as new generations project their own values onto old ideas. At the time it was conceived and built, fasces made perfect sense for the Lincoln Memorial. Fasces were a symbol of long-lasting civilization on which our government was based, and a symbol of the very structure of our national identity. In the aftermath of World War II, fasces might have been more taboo, a reminder of doctrines incongruous with American notions of equality and democracy. Today, probably for many reasons, many of us fail to recognize the symbol and its significance, both of which surround us in the Lincoln Memorial. If we lose sight of its symbol and its meaning, my fellow Americans, we lose the values the Lincoln Memorial was built to convey to us, the strength of our union, and the inestimable value of the man who fought to save it. Good night, and God bless. Interesting that it's all the rage to tear down statues and other symbols of perceived oppression, except one that is openly acknowledged to have had its roots in fascism and directly tied to characters like Mussolini and Hitler. Hitler, by the way, having been directly aided by a handful of U.S. corporations and elites. And the topics of symbols and fascism, this all made me recall something that seems so appropriate for this very moment. Now that's a symbol. After recovering from your shock at such an image, I'm sure you puzzle at how, in this day and age, This kind of shameful structure, with all its obvious connotations to horrible people and movements and institutions and all forms of human depravity, how could that exist in some backward, dictatorial shithole here somewhere? Let's see. No? Wait. Here? At Naval Base Coronado, near San Diego, California? So here we have a complex of 4 L-shaped buildings comprising barracks at this naval base, and I should add that with the map's orientation, of course, being north to south, the arrangement is exactly that of Hitler's Nazi swastika, precisely at a 45-degree angle. And here are some highlights from a June 2022 article on the news site sfgate.com. The Navy claimed that the final design was a mistake, and that initial plans drawn up in the 1960s were ultimately changed, which resulted in the final product we see today. However, an Israeli-American researcher named Avraham Siegel found documentation that the Navy was aware of how the swastika-like L-shaped design would appear from the start, and approved it before construction began, which he then documented in a 2007 letter to the Navy. The New York Times reported at the time that the Navy admitted the configuration had a swastika likeness. It goes on to say that this only became a big deal with the development of mapping sites that show it because, of course, given that it's a military installation, it's a no-fly zone, so it had never been seen before from the air. Mommy? Yes, sweetie. My teacher said the swastika represents fascism and evil. So why is there one down there at a naval base of a country founded on the outward pretension of freedom and justice? Oh, honey, that's what grown-ups call a coincidence. Those men just made a boo-boo when they oriented those grossly obvious swastikas exactly at 45 degrees, just like the Nazis. Now here, have some more screen time. The final nugget in the article is this. Some have argued that as the troubling symbol is only visible from above and no drones or aircraft are permitted to fly in the area, then simply removing or blurring the overhead shot from Google Maps and other mapping sites would be a sufficient fix. Something that occurs on other sensitive military bases across the world for various reasons. So summoning all of your capacity for careful, independent thought and inquiry, what do you think is really going on here? And as I continue to stress, what I mean by really going on is not wrestling over whether a provable link can be established between fascist elements that would have caused government buildings to be constructed like this. It's not what I'm after. What I'm talking about is coming to terms with the nature and character of the institutions and people with the responsibility for this type of thing becoming a reality. And it sure seems like a far cry from this. I don't know where or when it happened, but something happened. This is all another way of saying that at least what I'm seeing with my own eyes in no way agrees with the official narrative. You're really going to tell me that this was built just over 20 years after the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II, and at a location where it just so happens that it couldn't be viewed from above, and all of this was a result of an error? Oops. Anyone else out there think this is some grade A BS? It wouldn't have anything to do with Operation Paperclip, would it? You know, where the loads of Nazi scientists like Wernher von Braun and his buddies ended up in this country as a direct result of the United States government and military actively wooing them, so they didn't end up doing their dirty business for the Soviet Union? That's right. If they're going to be doing it for anyone, it should be for the good old US of A. Of course, nothing to see here. Because that's just what you gotta do to make that old democracy sausage. Wanna watch? Neither do I. Oof. Apparently talking about an institution claiming a legitimate monopoly on violence so that it can steal from me and then spend that money to erect buildings glorifying the symbology of a murderous regime tends to get me a little off topic, I admit. But that's actually a perfect place to stop. Before we go, though, let's hear something on the topic from the great Manly P. Hall. Symbolism is the language of mysteries. By symbols, men have ever sought to communicate to each other those thoughts which transcend the limits of language. So go forth and be aware of the symbols all around you and what they are trying to convey. Find the esoteric in this exoteric world. And join me next time when we conclude the use of subversive symbols as a form of mind control, and then wrap this whole section up with a peek at our final technique, false flag attacks. Until then, remember to always do your own thinking. Be well. And just between us, immediately to the west of Forward Barracks Gestapo I was talking about earlier are two mighty intriguing buildings with shapes that are awfully, unique? Am I just a conspiracy nut job to suggest those look a lot like aircraft? Of course I am. Nothing to see here either. And being led around by the nose through the most juvenile forms of manipulation. This is 2 terabytes of books, audio, and video. Hello there. As I've shared before, there is overwhelming evidence of the enslavement. Hello there. How we came to be in this state is in large part due to the effects of tools and methodologies of mind control that we have been studied and honed and optimally take advantage. But with the glasses, he now understands. He sees what the message is. So ignorance is either, so what symbol is most effective? And what are you about? Which to anyone with sufficient mental agility and the courage, energy, warmth, locomotion. No. Locomotion. However, an Israeli-American researcher named Abraham Siegel found documentation that the Navy was aware of how the swastika L-shaped design would appear from the start and approved it before construction. However, an Israeli-American researcher named Abraham Siegel found documentation that the Navy was aware of how the swastika shaped. I just am having trouble with this. Apparently talking about an institution claiming a legitimate monopoly. And just between us, immediately